What if the next global conflict didn't erupt in the South China Sea or the Middle East, but in the frozen silence of the Arctic? It might sound like a setting for a sci-fi thriller, but as the ice melts and the Arctic becomes more accessible, a high-stakes race for dominance is unfolding. This isn't just about territory, it's about control over trillions in untapped resources, vital shipping lanes, and strategic military positioning. In this video, we explore how climate change is reshaping global geopolitics, why the Arctic is becoming a battleground for world powers, and what it means for the balance of power in the 21st century. Let's dive in. For most of history, the Arctic was considered an unreachable wilderness. But thanks to global warming, the Arctic Ocean is now navigable for longer periods each year, revealing not just open waters but access to nearly 13% of the world's undiscovered oil and 30% of its undiscovered natural gas. These numbers come straight from the US Geological Survey. This massive wealth of resources is drawing attention from the world's major powers, especially the United States, Russia, China, and key NATO members. But it's not just about energy. The Arctic is also becoming a new global trade route. The Northern Sea Route, which runs along the Russian coast, can cut travel times between Asia and Europe by up to 40% compared to traditional routes like the Suez Canal. Control over this region could mean economic supremacy for decades to come. Russia is currently the dominant Arctic power. It has the largest Arctic coastline, a string of military bases dotting the region, and a fleet of more than 40 icebreakers, including nuclear-powered ones, which no other country has. President Vladimir Putin has described the Arctic as a region of strategic national interest. And it shows. Russia has been rapidly militarizing its northern border and reinforcing its claims to the continental shelf under the Arctic Ocean. The Kremlin wants to tap into the region's oil and gas potential and secure shipping routes that could replace Europe as a market for its energy exports. But here's the twist: Russia's push into the Arctic also makes it vulnerable. Climate change might open up economic opportunities, but it also exposes massive infrastructure to environmental risks and increases tensions with NATO. The United States has been relatively late to the Arctic game. With only 2 aging icebreakers and minimal infrastructure, the US risks falling behind. But recent moves show a shift in strategy. The Pentagon now lists the Arctic as a key area of strategic competition. The US is strengthening military cooperation with allies like Canada, Norway, and Denmark, and has opened a consulate in Greenland, the first in decades. Greenland and the Danish-controlled Faroe Islands are crucial. Their location between North America and Europe makes them ideal for radar stations, air bases, and missile detection systems. The US also sees China's involvement in the Arctic as a red flag. Although China doesn't border the region, it calls itself a near-Arctic state, and is investing heavily in scientific outposts, icebreakers, and trade routes. China is playing the long game. It's using scientific cooperation and investment as a Trojan horse for influence. Chinese companies have invested in Arctic mining operations, infrastructure projects in Greenland, and even sought stakes in key ports. Beijing's Polar Silk Road Initiative is a part of its wider Belt and Road Initiative, aiming to create an economic corridor through the Arctic that links China to Europe. This route would be faster, cheaper, and bypass geopolitical choke points like the Strait of Malacca. But Western nations are growing wary. China's opaque intentions, combined with its growing military and economic influence, are raising alarm bells in Washington, Brussels, and Ottawa. What do you think? Should countries without Arctic borders, like China, be allowed to stake a claim in the region? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let's get a conversation going. Lost in the great power competition are the people who have called the Arctic home for centuries. Indigenous communities, from the Inuit in Canada to the Sami in Norway, are facing cultural and environmental upheaval. As ice melts and industries move in, traditional hunting and fishing grounds are disappearing. Pollution, habitat destruction, and climate change are threatening ways of life that have existed for thousands of years. Moreover, the Arctic is one of the planet's most sensitive ecosystems. A misstep here could have global consequences. Oil spills, black carbon emissions from ships, and the release of methane from thawing permafrost could accelerate global warming even more. The race for dominance could easily become a race to disaster. The Arctic is governed by a patchwork of treaties and organizations. The main framework is the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, which allows countries to extend their economic zones based on the extent of the continental shelves. This is why countries like Russia and Canada are making aggressive submissions to the UN to claim vast underwater territories. Meanwhile, the Arctic Council, comprising 8 Arctic nations, was meant to foster cooperation, but its effectiveness is being tested by rising tensions. China is not a member of the Council but holds observer status. Its increasing involvement could eventually destabilize the already fragile balance of power. It's not just about trade and resources. The Arctic is becoming a strategic military zone. Submarines can hide under the ice, long-range missiles can be stationed in remote bases, and early warning systems can be placed to monitor rival activity. Russia is deploying hypersonic missiles and air defense systems in the region. The US is running joint exercises with NATO allies. Meanwhile, countries like Sweden and Finland, previously neutral, are now looking to join NATO due to increasing Arctic tensions. The militarization of the Arctic could lead to miscalculations, accidents, or even skirmishes that spiral out of control. So, what's next for the Arctic? Will it become a zone of peaceful cooperation or the next flashpoint in global politics? Some experts believe that shared interests in science, environmental protection, and shipping safety could keep tensions in check. Others warn that as the ice recedes, so too does the buffer that once kept countries apart. If current trends continue, the Arctic could become a chessboard where the great powers test each other's limits. The outcome will shape not just regional dynamics, but the very structure of international power in the decades to come. The Arctic may look like a frozen wasteland, but it's fast becoming one of the most strategic theaters on Earth. With trillions in resources, new trade routes, and global military implications, the melting ice could very well spark the next global conflict. What do you think? Will cooperation win the day, or are we headed for an icy standoff? Let us know in the comments, and if you found this video insightful, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into global power and geopolitics. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.